The room fell silent the moment those words were spoken. My son finally has a real family. Margaret Collins smiled proudly as she raised her champagne glass. Around her, guests nodded politely. Some even applauded. Only one person didn't move. Rachel Harper. She stood frozen near the back of the beautifully decorated reception hall, her 7-year-old daughter, Emma, holding tightly to her hand. Emma looked up in confusion. Mom, Grandma Margaret wasn't talking about us. Rachel forced a smile she didn't feel. No, sweetheart. She wasn't. My name is Rachel Harper. I was 34 years old. A widowed mother raising my little girl alone after my husband, Daniel, died in a construction accident 5 years earlier. Margaret wasn't my mother-in-law anymore. Not legally. After Daniel's death, my relationship with his family slowly disappeared. Phone calls became rare. Holiday invitations stopped. Eventually, they treated Emma and me like painful reminders of someone they wanted to forget. Meanwhile, Daniel's younger brother, Andrew, rebuilt his life. He married a successful businesswoman named Melissa. Together they welcomed a baby boy. This afternoon was the baby's first birthday. To my surprise, Margaret had invited Emma and me. I thought perhaps she wanted to reconnect. Maybe enough time had finally passed. Maybe grief had softened everyone. I was wrong. Throughout the party, Emma quietly tried to join her cousins. Most ignored her. Whenever she reached for a balloon, another child grabbed it first. She never complained. She simply wandered back beside me. Then came the family speech. Margaret stood proudly beside Andrew. My son has everything now. A wonderful wife. A beautiful baby. And finally, a complete family. The sentence echoed through the room. Emma squeezed my hand. What about Daddy? I knelt beside her. Your daddy loved you more than anything. She whispered. Then aren't we family too? Before I could answer, Margaret continued. I know the past was painful, but today is about new beginnings. We're finally whole again. Several guests clapped. I quietly picked up my purse. It was time to leave. As Emma and I reached the front door, someone spoke behind us. Rachel. I turned. Andrew stood there. His expression looked troubled. I'm sorry. I didn't know Mom planned to say that. I nodded politely. It's all right. No, it isn't. Before he could say anything else, Margaret appeared. They're leaving already? She sounded almost relieved. I think it's for the best. Emma looked directly at her grandmother. Grandma, did Grandpa stop being your family after he died too? Margaret's smile disappeared. The room became uncomfortably quiet. No one knew how to answer a 7-year-old asking the question every adult wanted to avoid. Just then, the front doors opened. A tall man stepped inside carrying a small birthday gift. His 8-year-old son walked beside him. The little boy immediately smiled when he saw Emma. Hi. You came. Emma's face lit up. Dad. She corrected herself quickly. I mean, Mr. Noah. The man smiled warmly. He wasn't Emma's father. But for the past 2 years, he had quietly become one of the most important people in her life. His name was Noah Bennett. A widowed single father raising his own son alone. Emma and his son had become best friends at school. Over time, Noah and I had become close too. He looked around the silent room, then at Emma's tear-filled eyes. Finally, he gently stepped beside us. Without saying a single word, he reached down and took Emma's free hand. She smiled instantly. Margaret frowned. And who exactly are you? Noah looked at Emma first, then calmly answered. I'm the man who's been showing this little girl what family feels like. While everyone else was busy deciding she didn't count, the room became so quiet that the only sound was the soft music playing from the speakers. Margaret stared at Noah. And who exactly are you to lecture this family? Noah didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply smiled politely. My name is Noah Bennett. I'm a widowed father. My son and Emma have been best friends for 2 years. He looked toward Rachel. And Rachel has become one of the strongest people I've ever known. Margaret crossed her arms. You don't understand our history. No, I understand something more important. He gently squeezed Emma's little hand. I understand children. And children remember the words adults think they'll forget. Emma leaned against Rachel. Her eyes were still wet. Noah knelt until he was at her eye level. Emma, how do you know someone is family? The little girl thought carefully. They stay. He smiled. Exactly. They stay when you're happy. They stay when you're sad. They stay when life gets messy. Then he stood and looked around the room. A family isn't erased because someone dies. It's remembered by the people who keep loving each other. Several guests quietly nodded. Andrew lowered his eyes. His wife, Melissa, reached for his hand. Rachel finally spoke. I didn't come here to argue. I came because Emma deserved to know her grandmother. Margaret answered defensively. I invited you. Rachel nodded. You invited us. But you reminded everyone we no longer belonged. Emma suddenly stepped forward. Her small voice filled the silent room. Grandma, if Daddy was still alive, would you still say Uncle Andrew finally has a family? Margaret opened her mouth. No words came out. For the first time that afternoon, she realized how her sentence had sounded through the ears of a 7-year-old. Andrew slowly walked toward Emma. He knelt beside her. I'm sorry. I should have stopped, Mom. Emma looked at him. Do you still love Daddy? Andrew's eyes filled with tears. Every single day. Then why don't people talk about him anymore? No one had an answer. Melissa quietly wiped away a tear. She walked over to Rachel. I owe you an apology too. Rachel looked surprised. I knew Margaret wanted to leave the past behind. I didn't realize leaving the past behind meant leaving you and Emma behind too. Then Melissa turned toward her mother-in-law. Daniel was your son. Emma is still his daughter. Nothing changes that. Several relatives quietly agreed. An elderly aunt stood up. I've been thinking the same thing all afternoon. Another cousin nodded. We all miss Daniel. But pretending he never existed doesn't make the pain disappear. Margaret looked around the room. For the first time, she realized she was standing alone. She slowly sat down. Her voice became almost a whisper. I thought, if I focused on Andrew's new family, it would hurt less. Rachel's expression softened. It doesn't hurt less. It just hurts different people. Margaret covered her face. I couldn't look at Emma. Every time I saw her, I saw Daniel. And every time I saw Daniel, I remembered the day we buried him. Rachel quietly walked closer. I understand grief. I lost my husband. Emma lost her father. But she also lost her grandmother. Margaret began crying openly. I never wanted that. You created it anyway. The words weren't cruel. They were simply true. After several long moments, Margaret slowly stood. She walked toward Emma. Then she knelt in front of her granddaughter. I'm sorry. I forgot something very important. Emma looked at her quietly. What? When your daddy died, you didn't stop being his little girl. And I didn't stop being your grandma. Emma wrapped her small arms around Margaret's neck. I missed you. Margaret held her tightly, crying harder than anyone had ever seen. I missed you too. Months passed. Healing wasn't immediate. Trust rarely returns overnight. But Margaret began showing up. She attended Emma's school concerts, cheered at soccer games, called every Sunday evening. Sometimes she simply listened while Emma told long stories about school. No one ever tried to replace Daniel. He respected the place Daniel would always hold in Emma's heart. Instead, he quietly became another person she could depend on. 1 year later, Rachel and Noah married in a small outdoor ceremony. There were no grand speeches, no extravagant decorations, just close friends and family. When it came time for the reception, Margaret stood to speak. She looked first at Emma, then at Noah. Years earlier, I believed family was something you could lose. I know better now. She smiled through tears. Family grows. It makes room. It remembers. And it never asks a child to choose between the people who love her. She turned toward Noah. You didn't replace my son. You honored him. And by loving Rachel and Emma, you reminded all of us what family truly means. Noah simply nodded. I made one promise the day Emma first called me when she was scared. What promise? That she'd never wonder again whether she belonged. Years later, a framed photograph sat on the mantel in Rachel and Noah's home. It showed Daniel's picture beside newer family photos. One evening, a visitor asked Emma why her late father was displayed with everyone else. Emma smiled proudly. Because families don't erase people they love. They just keep making the circle bigger. Looking around the living room, Margaret realized that little girl had taught every adult in the family a lesson they should have known all along. A real family isn't defined by who arrived first or last. It isn't measured by marriage certificates or bloodlines alone. A real family is built by the people who stay, who remember, who forgive, and who make sure that no child ever feels forgotten simply because life moved forward after loss.